Welcome to Inspire Campfire, a podcast where ordinary people tell their stories of extraordinary adventure. These are campfire stories meant to inspire the rest of us to light the fire within, get outside, follow our dreams, and return to tell our own stories. Ready? Let's strike the match.
Welcome to the show. I'm your host, Scott Wurzbacher. Not long ago, I traveled with a group of 15 to Nepal for a once-in-a-lifetime trek to Mount Everest Base Camp. Over 12 days, we hiked through the Himalayas alongside the incredible Paralympic gold medalist, Karen Darke. Facing challenges, solving problems, and embracing moments of awe, abundance, and magic. Now that we're back from this epic adventure, I'm releasing a 3-part series about the experience. In today's episode, the third and final installment, Karen joins me to share her perspective on our journey. She's a longtime friend of the podcast, and this marks her 6th appearance on the show. The entire trip began over a year ago with a casual conversation and one bold question. Wouldn't it be amazing to trek to Everest Base Camp together? It was a big, audacious dream, and now here we are reflecting on this experience that is now just a memory. I'm thrilled to share this final story from our Everest Base Camp adventure with you today. Karen, welcome back to the campfire.
Thank you, Scott. Nice to be by the fire.
I'm so excited. It is just barely over a month that I got back from Everest Base Camp. I know your adventure continued a little bit, but I'm so excited to just reflect on the experience. Gotten to talk to a few of the others, and listeners would have been able to hear that recap the week before our episode. But here we are, ready to talk about you and your journey up to the top of Everest Base Camp.
I spent quite a bit of time since getting back being asked how the journey was. And my answer's always been, ask me in a month. Maybe I'll have made sense of it by then. So if it's a month since we got back from that particular trek, maybe now is the right time.
This is so awesome. So just for listeners, I'm just going to quickly set the stage. You've been on the show. This is the 6th time you've been on the show. It's crazy. And, I give you so much credit to, helping me get the confidence just to build this podcast and create it. You were episode number 7, where we talked about you and your story. So for listeners that may not be familiar with your whole story, that's definitely a great place to start. But I guess a quick thank you to you for being such a supporter of Inspire Campfire and just being with me this whole way. And, now sharing this.
That's very nice of you, but I credit it all to you and your passion for adventure and sharing it and encouraging others. So I'm just tagging along with the ride, and it's been fun.
Oh, you're the best. So Karen, something you and I have talked about at great length, probably on other episodes and even off the podcast itself, is this idea of the hero's journey. And Joseph Campbell, he laid this out in his book, The Hero with 1,000 Faces. And, it's a very popular concept. But this Everest Base Camp trek was loaded with the hero's journey. I mean, just loaded with it. And the hero's journey always starts with the call to adventure. So I feel like we should start there. And I wonder if you could share your recollection of the call to adventure for this base camp trip.
I think you just asked me. You told me it was one of your whippers, which is a phrase that I developed over time. Wouldn't it be amazing to go to Everest Base Camp? And would I consider coming along with you? And I just said yes. And then, and like I always do, afterwards go, oh, what does this actually mean? And then I look into a bit more of the detail, and then I start digging a little deeper, and then realizing I've signed myself up to something fairly ridiculous. And then I have a few fears and a few doubts, and I never retreat because I always just know that the fear and the doubt is something to overcome and to work around. So yeah, that's how we got started. I've decided that I should be called the crash test dummy of people's adventure ideas, because I'm realizing that people have these inspired ideas and I say yes, and then later on go, okay. And just to add a footnote to that, after we got back from Everest, I received a Facebook message from somebody, a mountain guide in Pakistan, asking me if I was planning to go to the base camp of K2. And I was so exhausted, I just replied and said, no, I'm not.
Oh my God. Karen Darke said no. Oh my gosh, is it true?
And it has another invitation on the back of it to go on an adventure in the Sahara Desert. Cycling in the Sahara, I haven't said no, but I really have no idea how any of my bikes will work in sand, but watch this space. We'll see.
Wow. Wow. So you just, there's so many places we can go and everything that you just said. I mean, so a few things, sticking with the hero's journey. You said that I asked, and I'm going to give my recollection. It's pretty similar, but I'm going to give my recollection too and see how they jive. But you said I asked and you just said yes. And part of the hero's journey is like when you get the call to adventure, typically before the yes and before like going into the crossing over the threshold, there's like the refusal of the call. And somehow like you in your lifetime have seemed to sort of bypass that refusal of the call. Is that like a conditioned thing? Like, was there ever a refusal of the call?
That's a really interesting question. I think it has become conditioned, to be honest, as to say yes. I'm not sure when or how that happened or why. I have this natural calling and curiosity for adventure, and it always did, pre and post becoming paralyzed. But I think, yeah, being paralyzed, definitely, I'm so used to challenges that I just instantly look for how you can do something rather than how you can't. So I think it's wired into me, this instant ability just to take the calling and go. There have been a couple of occasions where after beginning, I've really been able to look at something and make a decision that it wasn't the right thing or wasn't safe. So I always think that if we haven't begun, if we haven't tried, we haven't, we're never going to get anywhere if we don't try. So I believe in trying, and that means starting out. And I do believe that there are times when it's the right call to not continue, especially if safety is an issue or if, other things come into play. So I do remember the first time I learned to say no in the middle of an adventure. I was actually sea kayaking around Corsica, and I realized that the conditions were way too much for my ability, and just made the call that it wasn't the right thing to continue doing. But I was really proud because at least we'd started and we got halfway around Corsica before the crazy February, March winds were howling through the straits, and it was time to say no. But yeah.
Well, it's almost like you've trained yourself to say yes first, and then the refusal of the call kind of comes in the form of fears and doubts. But by then you've already said yes. So I guess it's a little easier maybe to push past those. But you mentioned in this one, like you immediately said yes, and then you had some fears and doubts. So let's go back to the yes. Like, was this just a conditioned yes, or was there something that really spoke to you on this one? I guess the real question is, why did you say yes?
I wanted to share an adventure with you, Scott. We had a part adventure to Bhutan 3 years ago, but it wasn't like a real out there in the wilds kind of adventure. So that was a big appeal. I previously met friends and people that know you that came to Bhutan, and I loved the people I met. So I thought, well, it's going to be a great team of people if they're friends of Scott's. So that was another factor. And then maybe the third factor was the big word Himalaya, because I find it hard to refuse any visit to the Himalaya. I seem to be constantly attracted to go there, despite it being the least wheelchair-friendly place in the world, possibly. But it's not. I can't remember how many times I've been there now, and the other journeys have not been by any stretch of the imagination like this. They've definitely not been trekking. They've been cycling on roads across the Himalaya, around the Himalaya, some with surfaces, some without. But this was next level in terms of where I would have ever imagined myself going. And I think maybe the other factor was that I think it was 2022, I was introduced to the ICE trike. ICE stands for Inspired Cycle Engineering, and a special hand bike attachment had been made for their incredibly robust tricycle, and I've tested it quite a bit. It did have a test at Kilimanjaro. We did make it, so I did, start to experiment in places that I would never have considered going. I have a lot of faith in this machine because I saw what it did on not just on Kilimanjaro but on Scottish mountains. So the combination, I guess, all just came together to say yes.
Yeah. Yeah. And I guess just to share, I think it went down pretty similar in my mind, but I specifically remember having a conversation, and I think I had shared that Everest Base Camp was on my vision board. It was a trip that some friends had done, or they were planning for that year. And unfortunately, the scheduling didn't work for me, but I said, it's on my vision board. I'm doing it, and I'm going to book this trip for next year. And I remember you saying something about how Everest Base Camp and trekking in the Himalayas was something that you'd been kind of had come to your awareness somehow. And you were just yeah, I just remember you kind of suggesting that there was something that had kind of been planted in your mind.
Maybe you're right. Maybe after Kilimanjaro, I discovered that an Australian guy who was in a wheelchair had been to Everest Base Camp. Mm-hmm. And it had really kind of, it just planted a little seed, probably. I had no real information about how he'd done it or how it'd gone. Or I just saw some images of him doing a wheelbarrow along the trail. Yeah. His legs being held and him kind of walking along with his arms. So, and I always have this belief that if someone's done it before, then of course it can be done again. And maybe that seed, you're right, maybe that seed had already gone into my mind somewhere. So then when you suggested it, it seemed a little serendipitous that it hadn't been long before that I'd been looking at these images of this Australian guy doing just that journey.
Yeah. But I think it was just kind of oh, yes, it's something I've been kind of thinking about. And then I was just well, come on, let's do it. And then you immediately were yes, let's do it. And I'm okay, we're doing this. And
well, I seem to be in denial. I seem to have deleted that bit of my memory that I made it all your idea.
Well, I mean, the thing is, for me, what goes through my mind is, and I've told you this before, this is Karen Darke. And I go through mentally, all of the things, all of the accolades and all the accomplishments that you've achieved in your life. And I'm this is just another one. If any person can do this, it's you. And so I really didn't think twice about it. I'm yeah, if Karen wants to go, if she's made her mind up, she's going to do this. There's no,
and now you know the truth. Now you know that I'm not to be put on a pedestal. I'm a regular human being with all the regular challenges, and that somehow I do have this ability just to say yes and then go, ooh, interesting.
So there's so much more detail we're going to get into on that. So you talked about some fears and doubts. You started looking into this a little bit. What were some of those things that came up for you after you said yes that caused you to sort of second guess this a little bit?
I mean, the main issue is, I suppose I've done enough adventures now that I trust my ability to look after myself. It doesn't mean that things might not happen, but I know how to sort of back myself up in the medical sense. There's lots of things I have to manage, especially in the wilderness, like bladder and bowels and all that kind of side of things, as well as looking after my skin. And of course, the added challenges of altitude and temperature variations and immobility after long haul flights, lots of aspects which might creep in for people. And I felt comfortable with those. The unknowns for me with this were the terrain and what the trail would be like and whether it would be suitable for the trike. How wide would it be? How many sections of it would just not be suitable for pedaling? And so I contacted someone I used to climb, or I know back from my university days, quite a famous British mountaineer called Kenton Cool, who has climbed Everest about 20 times in a guiding capacity. So I know he walks the trail regularly. And the next thing I knew, I was getting pictures sent through and measurements of the trail. And he was really reassuring because I could see all the measurements were wider than the bike. And he did say the last 2 days might be really challenging. I'm not sure how you're going to manage those. So I was kind of expecting that I might be able to cycle most of it until that last day or two going up to Everest Base Camp across the moraine. This part of the story you don't actually know, Scott, because when I came back from, I stayed out in Nepal, and I was in the airport 2 weeks after you left, having just returned from Bhutan again. And who should I come across in the airport but Kenton Cool?
Oh my
who had literally just landed because he was arriving in Nepal. He arrived at exactly the same time as I arrived in from Bhutan, and he just shouted my name across the whole of the airport.
Oh my goodness.
Came running over and he just said, "I can't believe you did it." He said, "I thought it was impossible, but I didn't want to say so."
Oh my God. And you had no idea, like you just happened to see him in the airport. That was not planned at all.
No, we just bumped into each other. So it did remind me, because I'm very trusting of people, and a lot of my friends and people I know are very positive. So he'd given me this whole positive slant and sent me pictures and all the measurements. And it was really interesting to me that he thought it was impossible. So I was surprised that we'd made it. So yeah, there we go.
It is not impossible.
But I've forgotten the original question now, but I think it was to do with, how did I start to break it down and what kind of fears did come up? So I would say I didn't really have fears as such, but I was concerned that basically about the trike and whether it would be fit for the terrain, along with what to do if it's not fit, because, I know that porters are amazing people, but I wasn't really sure how that would work. And there were little other things like, will it fit in the tiny twin prop plane that goes up to Lukla? But I did quite a lot of what I normally do, which is digging in deep to the detail. I emailed the plane company. I sent measurements and dimensions and checked out the dimensions of the door on the plane. And I figured it all out. It was going to fit in the door. But what I didn't get feedback on was the actual size of the tiny other door in the back of the plane to the luggage compartment. So as we'll unravel as we go, lots of other challenges appeared, which I tried to mitigate, but it didn't all work out in advance.
Oh my goodness. All right, let's just go there. So for listeners, can you sort of recap a little bit about, you've already kind of given a description of the ice strike, but specifically your experiences with it as you started out on this journey. I mean, even from the UK, like what happened?
So, I mean, as soon as I travel with the ice strike, it is one massive adventure. It is way bigger than you might anticipate. It looks bigger. The fat tires are like 5 inches wide. It just looks like a tractor is the best way of describing it. It's like a tractor bike. Yeah. So you turn up at a check-in desk with that, instantly faces change. So the first challenge was, it had broken last summer. It had been getting repaired. I only got the parts fitted and sorted, and I picked up the bike on the way to the airport to fly to Nepal. So I knew and trusted the bike, and I knew and trusted the mechanic who'd worked on it. But, it was a reuniting on the way. Then at check-in and security, I travel with the bike whole with all the wheels on, so that it's simpler and reduces the risk of it getting damaged, some vulnerable parts. But of course, it won't fit through scanning machines. So then all the packaging has to be ripped off it to check every single crevice that I'm not smuggling something. Right. So the journey began challenging already leaving Scotland, where the bike was literally, after much time packing it up, was literally taken apart, picked apart. And then, of course, the next step was getting it on the taxi from the airport in Kathmandu. I think within a minute of leaving the airport, we were stopped by the police because the only place the trike would fit was on the roof rack of the vehicle, and it looked like this huge tractor on the roof, and do you have permission to carry that up there? I mean, that just paints the picture of what it's like traveling with this tricycle.
Yeah.
So
and our guide, Badri, picked you up at the airport. So, and also for context, you were traveling with others that were on our trek all the way from Scotland?
I was very fortunate as the plans unfolded that 2 very dear friends from Scotland decided they would love to join the trip. So myself, Vicky and Claire traveled together. And then we picked up the other Claire, who was based in England along the way in Dubai. And yeah, so I had all that help with the transport of the trike, which I need because it's a lot to handle on my own.
Yeah. And so then when you got to Kathmandu, I'm curious if you remember like Badri's, our guide's sort of reaction when he first saw the bike.
I mean, I think he was doing a bit of denial about my desire to pedal the bicycle. I think he was hoping that I would just acquiesce at some point to enjoying being carried in a wicker basket around the Himalayas. He obviously didn't know me very well. Now he does. He realizes that I love to be an active part of the group and to move my body, and that's a really beautiful way to experience nature. So I think he realized quite early on in those first few days, I don't like to say this about myself, but kind of what he was dealing with. That I wasn't just going to put the bike down and say, oh, never mind then, I'll just go in the basket. So he'd assured me that it would fit on the plane. And I appreciate Badri's natural tendency to support and be positive, but I think he hadn't realized quite how big it would look and quite what a challenge it was going to be to get it onto the tiny little flight up to Lukla. So a lot of hard work on his part unfolded as he negotiated with travel agents and airlines, Summit Air specifically, trying to find ways for my bike to be dismantled to be as small as possible to fit into this plane. So yeah.
So part of, and I think we're going to kind of integrate as this whole story unfolds, but I want to bring up coming back to the hero's journey. Like part of the hero's journey is once you cross the threshold and go into the adventure, the idea is that there's always these supernatural aids that show up along the way. And they don't show up until you've said yes and you go on the journey. Some people think somebody's going to show up and solve all your problems before you even say yes, but it requires saying yes first, which you clearly did. And this trip was just loaded with things just working out, supernatural aids in human form, but also just circumstances, conditions, things that just worked out in these miraculous ways. And the first one that I personally witnessed was Badri had a vehicle that was coming to our hotel in Kathmandu to pick up your bike and bring it to the airport. And it was en route. It was like 30 minutes away. And as we were sort of packing up the bike, we discovered that one of the tires was flat or had gone flat. And I don't remember what the cause was. Maybe we didn't even know, but it had no air in it. We were trying to pump it up and it didn't seem to be doing anything. So now, like, in my mind, I'm like, oh, great. We're in Kathmandu. We're getting ready to go to Lukla. Like, this is just my thinking. Like, we're toast. Like, we're done. But that's not the way you think. And then all of a sudden, Karen, there is this person standing right next to me by the name of Joe, who I didn't know this, but was a good friend of yours. And she lives in Nepal. And she just, from my perspective, she just appeared. She was just there. And she says, no problem. Come with me. And one of Claire or Vicky, somebody handed me the tire and I go with Joe. And in 5 minutes, we're at a bike shop in Kathmandu. And some person that owns this bike shop or runs this bike shop is friends with Joe, fixes the tire. We're back to the hotel in 10 minutes, like 5 minutes before the Jeep arrives. And it's just like this miracle. And my mind is blown. Like, where did this person come from?
It's so funny hearing you talk about that, because that's just literally how my life runs. That seems to just be how it goes.
I know this, and it blows my mind.
Well, there's another little twist here. I'll answer your question first, but then I'll tell you something. So Joe we did a master's in development training together.
Yeah.
A long time ago, and 11 years ago when I was in Kathmandu, she was living there full time. Now she's there part time. So I'd arranged to meet up with her for a coffee that morning, not knowing that there was going to be this whole drama with the bike and a rush to get it to the airport in advance to see if it could fit on the plane, etc. And in the rush of trying to pack the bike up ready for the Jeep, as you just described, we realized the wheel was flat. Of course, I had spare tubes and tires, but the valve seemed to be completely jammed. And every spare tire, or every spare tube is valuable up in the mountains. So I didn't want to just scrap one of the tubes. So there was a lot to do in a short space of time. So like you said, Jo was there and she knew Himalayan single track, and suddenly it was all sorted and fixed while I focused on trying to collapse the bike down. So yeah, that's kind of just how it goes typically. But one of the things that happened actually after you left is that I'm always curious about different religions and different approaches to life. And I decided to go and visit one of the shaman centers in Kathmandu. It was quite a funny experience. Me and another friend called Kala decided to go into this shaman temple on this experience, and she started, and the shaman wanted to do some work with her, and then she didn't give him permission, so that was kind of all over. And then I was up, and then he did this kind of little process, and then he said, "Oh, there's no work to do here with you. You're very lucky. Everything always works out." And honestly, he also said, "You don't even need to meditate. Just keep doing whatever you're doing because luck always seems to come your way." So I don't know how much truth there was in any of this, but I did get the giggles about it, reflecting on the journey we've just been on and all the.
I mean, I witnessed that firsthand. It's insane. So let's continue with this bike story. So we get the bike on the Jeep. Audrey gets it to the airport, and we're going to fast forward a little bit because there's some back and forth on, whether it's going to get on the plane, whether it's going to be on our plane, whether it's going to be transported somewhere else. But miraculously, the bike and us, we all get to Lukla.
Miraculously.
And we think our problems are solved. What happens next?
So there's a piggyback from the plane over hundreds of steps that landed me and all of our team, and the porters were already waiting for us there on this concrete veranda. My bike shows up looking a little disheveled and in pieces and bits bubble wrapped, and everything appeared to be there. So I started building it with some help from Sam and a few others. I think Sam and Keith were fundamental in the mechanical department in helping me. And the whole time we were building it, I was kind of looking out for the bits I knew had been parceled up in Kathmandu, and I couldn't see the axle for one of the wheels. So I just assumed it would show up. And in the middle of kind of building the bike, someone appeared at my side that didn't look very Nepali and just looked quite Scottish and looked at me and said, "Karen Darke. Only one person I know in a wheelchair would be mad enough to be here." And I looked up at this chap, and took me a moment to register who it was. And it was a friend from Scotland called Colin, who I'd not seen for a very long time, who runs some outdoor shops in Scotland, and many years ago had helped me source bits of skis and set up my sit ski so I could learn to ski in the Scottish mountains. So it seemed very serendipitous as it unfolded that the axle was indeed not anywhere to be found. We hunted dustbins and the sides of paths and back in the airport, but it never appeared. At which point Colin announced that he knew a kind of wizard of engineering in the village, a chap called Sonam, and maybe there's a way to figure something out to fashion an axle if it didn't turn up. So I think I was still in denial at that stage, convinced that the missing axle would appear. And we're talking about lucky, but I suppose at this point there was a tiny bit of my brain that going, just focusing just a fraction on how unlucky it was to lose the one vital axle, or chastising myself that I didn't have a spare, or that I hadn't done something different in packaging it for the aeroplane. But in actual fact, it led to this whole series of quite incredible things, as you're describing. This Himalayan network of kindness and skill, and somehow having a real dilemma. And I remember you and I having this conversation of, is that it? Do we need to leave the bike behind? And can I sign up to being in a wicker basket for 2 weeks, which wasn't appealing at all. And I was worried about the impact of that on the porters, or the few porters that would be helping me, and on me, whether I'd find that enjoyable or not. In the middle of all that, this option to engineer another axle unraveled. And so I agreed to set off in the basket. I know we were chasing the clock and the weather to get to our tea room overnight, with the agreement that, assuming they could fashion an axle, that we'd have the bike the next day somehow. And kind of what happened.
So Karen, I mean, Colin, yet another supernatural aid. I mean, everybody there's 15 of us, and all of us are just in awe and amazed that this person shows up, just like Joe in Kathmandu. Now all of a sudden Colin's here. And, Joe helped us with the tire. It was kind of a one-time thing, and she was kind of there and then gone. Colin was with us for a good bit of the adventure. Watching things with the bike, kind of being there to kind of help you, keep you safe. I mean, again, like, did that feel like a supernatural aid for you too? I know, like, as witnesses, I couldn't not help feel that with my knowledge of the hero's journey, like between Joe and Colin. I mean, my mind is blown.
I don't know. I mean, Britain's a small place and we like to travel. So I am used to just bumping into people all over the world that I know. It did seem a little strange. And maybe I didn't even acknowledge at that point or realize at that point quite how key he would become in the weeks ahead. In fact, I wrote a few lines this morning. Here's what I wrote. Serendipity. Colin would become the knight, the savior of my ability to pedal in the Himalayas, one of my heroes of the adventure ahead. The others that I would come to love and elevate to hero status were Durga, Kumar, Tez, Amar, and Deepak. In fact, all of their family, the Bassnets, who would for the next few weeks be intensively involved in moving my wheelchair, my bike, or me over super rough terrain.
Oh, that's so awesome. Yeah, for listeners, that's the Porter team that Badri brought together for us, and we're going to talk about that kind of relationship that developed between you and the Porters over that time as well. But I remember you talked about that little concrete veranda where we're sitting there, like, trying to figure out what we're going to do with your bike. And again, like, admittedly, my mind is yet again. I mean, I didn't learn my lesson in Kathmandu when Joe showed me that we just had to walk 5 minutes to the bike shop. We were on the concrete veranda. And again, in my mind is like, okay, we're done. But no, that's not how Karen Darke works. And
well, I had a bit of me that wasn't, I had no idea what would happen. But I was definitely feeling grateful for Colin's suggestions of engineering something.
But like, when people ask me what my biggest takeaways were from this adventure, like, that experience of believing and trusting that things were going to work out is probably one of my biggest takeaways. And it's directly tied to what we're talking about right now. So one of the things was, like, and I don't think you were talking to me. I think I just witnessed this at one point on that concrete veranda. I clearly remember you looking up at the sky. And I don't think you were talking to, I think it was just you looking up at the sky and saying, please, universe. And then I remember that. I watched that. I remember watching you, and I remember these words, like, you spoke those words. And I don't know, maybe it was just, you thought it was a private moment, but I saw it. But it's just like, it's so clear to me that that's who you are. And I just wonder if, like, you could just say a few words about that, like, belief in the universe that you've come to develop, because it's amazing.
I mean, I don't know what to say about it other than I often have moments where I, like, really feel so thankful to the universe. Okay. For certain experiences or situations in my life, even just day to day. And then I also have moments where I really ask for help. And I guess that was one of them. Often before I travel, especially with complicated logistics like my bikes, where I know that it could be really difficult, I'll wake up that morning and I'll be, okay, thanks for making today work really smoothly and for lots of nice people helping and just allowing everything to flow easily so that I can arrive in this place and have fun along the way. So I suppose I do a bit of just preempting that and maybe just connecting with the image or the feeling of that before I do something. But I think it's just something I do without really thinking about it.
It is amazing. So the bike, Colin, our supernatural aid, shows up. We have all of this teamwork between his contacts, his knowledge, our guides, our porters, the team that we had, the bike maintenance skills that we had within our team to be able to help you. They were able to fashion a temporary axle to get the bike working. And we're on our way, at least for a little bit. So for listeners, it was sort of this combination of you being able to ride the bike with this functioning temporary axle that worked, and also spending some of the time in the basket that Badri and his team had created for you. So kind of like mixing the two. I wonder if you could just kind of talk a little bit about the trail itself and your journey on it, and how like the physicality of the trail was for you.
So I have a few distinct memories of that first day on the trike. First of all, when the porters brought it to the tea room that morning, they'd gone back down early to pick it up from Lukla and bring it back to where we'd got to the previous afternoon. It had a huge rip in the tire. There was a huge hole in it, and I knew, and so it was punctured, and I knew that I hadn't brought any tire levers because I'd remembered to pack them, and then I'd missed it in the day in Kathmandu. So I was like, okay, first of all, no tire levers, but at least I've got a spare tire and a spare tube. And then it turned out the porters had already set off up the mountain with the spare tire. I had a tube in my bag, but it was just one of those moments where it's like, oh, another thing has gone wrong, and I'm really not. I'd been so tired. I'd had some stuff going on in my personal life, which had meant I just wasn't quite as on it as I would have wanted to be before leaving Kathmandu. And so there I was with a huge gaping hole, no tire levers, no tire, and just kind of feeling like, oh, Karen, maybe this time you've just blown it. Like you just haven't got it right. All the positive things that happen normally, I've kind of blown it here. Anyway, a pair of spoons works really well as tire levers. I did already have that in mind when I realized I'd forgotten them. Actually, they probably were better than tire levers, so that was fine. And we patched up the hole in the tire and got the spare tube in, so we got on the road. Then when we got on the road, I think I was really strung out because of all the reasons I've said, from being tired and all these things going wrong and all the stress of the days in Kathmandu. And it was really, really intense. The trail was full of steps. I hadn't anticipated quite as many steps as there were. Big, big flights of concrete steps climbing up into the mountains. And then when there weren't steps, lots of boulders and extremely rocky, tough terrain. The porters were not looking that impressed with the bike. They were finding it really hard. They'd never seen anything like it. They'd never tried to help anyone navigate or anything like it. So they were looking like it was hard for them. And I'm quite kind of tuned into how people are feeling. So I was feeling it for them and wondering how this was all going to go. And it also didn't feel that safe, like descending some flights of steps, the back end, the porters were helping me like try and control the bike on some really precarious terrain, but they hadn't yet understood the dynamics of the bike and where it needed to be held or supported to help me navigate safely. So there were lots of precarious moments where I was nearly the tail end over my head. And then I was like, I didn't even bring a helmet. What was I thinking? And it just kind of went on like that. But I kept just, I suppose I just stayed calm and stayed with it. And we went out again the next day, and already it felt a lot better. The porters were tuned into it. It seemed like they actually quite liked it in a way that they didn't have to carry me all the time. And we started to get a bit of a dynamic going, and it started to feel a lot better until just before lunchtime, when descending a crazy, crazy steep path through a wood that was full of boulders. And I'd actually said just before it, maybe we should do the basket on this bit because it was so wildly out. It was just such tough terrain. I could see the bike was absolutely at its limit. Suddenly there was this catastrophic failure of the new axle. It sheared. I shot down onto kind of down the middle of the bike, and the bike's just upended in the middle of this trail. And I looked down at the wheel, and the disc brake is completely bent to the point of no return. And I just looked, and I knew, well, I can't say I knew because I thought that's it. That's game over for the bike. And felt really accepting of it. I was like, you know what? I didn't know what I was coming to. I never really knew what the trail would be like, whether the bike could handle it. So we're learning. And then I'll let you pick up the next bit.
Well, I'd like you to keep going because that wasn't the end of it.
It wasn't. We stopped for lunch and really studied the bike and pulled it apart. And then all these suggestions started. Well, could you ride on one brake because there are two discs, one on each wheel? That really did seem an extreme risk in the kind of terrain we were in. I didn't want to do that, but we decided through contact with Colin that there might be something we could do. And so let's carry the bike. I'll go in the basket for the few hours that were left that day up to the village of Temboche, and let's see what we can do when we get there. And between that moment and arriving in Temboche that evening, a whole other crazy Himalayan bit of magic unraveled, where it turned out that Himalayan single track, who Colin also knew back in Kathmandu, had a disc that would match and fit, that another axle could be located, that some Chinese women who were tourists were flying into our very village the next morning very early to have breakfast in the mountains, and that maybe there was a way that everything could get dropped off at the airport for them to bring up in the helicopter. And that's exactly what happened. I mean, it blows my mind to think about people getting up at 4 a.m. to get to the shop, to open it up, to give a break disc to someone on a motorbike who was driving to the airport to make it to a helicopter. On and on and on it went. But before I knew it, I was back on the bike that very morning, setting off just after breakfast, saying thank you to the Chinese women with their Prosecco and chocolate croissants, and then carrying on along the trail with quite a lot of disbelief that the bike was still going. And by this point, Colin had trekked down from his village to our village with some new axle, and decided to walk with us for a few days until we got back to his village.
Yeah. So just by the way, I actually didn't know all of that sort of had transpired. I had looked, like, there was this group of people that were eating like this luxury meal with like Prosecco, you said champagne. And I looked down and I just was like, because it was like, I mean, it was probably 9 or 10 o'clock in the morning. And I'm just like, I thought they were on a trek. I thought they were on some kind of a luxury trek. And I didn't realize that that was the group that actually brought the disc brake for you. But
yeah, I wasn't trying to gate cross Prosecco and croissants. I was
I looked down and I'm just like, oh, wow. Unbelievable. Just yet another experience. I mean, oh my goodness, it's just crazy. So, to your point, as you were both in the basket and navigating the bike, and by the way, for listeners, I mean, you were always surrounded by porters that were there to support, guide, push, pull, help. But admittedly, like it at times for me, it was hard to watch. I would look some of the terrain that you guys were navigating, and I saw like some of those twists and turns and like almost upendings. And while it did get better as we went and as the porters started to get kind of like used to it and kind of figuring it out, I mean, it was hard to watch. And like at those first couple of days of the trek, it was really difficult because obviously we had a group of 15 people. We're trying to keep everybody sort of moving and, kind of working towards our same direction, and also handling all of the challenges with the bike. And at one point, Karen, I think it was probably at mealtime at some point, and it was a day to 2 days in. And I remember like just sitting with you and asking you how things are going. And
I'm curious what I replied.
Karen, you looked at me in the eyes and you said, "Scott, this is the craziest thing I've ever done." And my heart pretty much stopped in that moment. I'm like, I've organized this trip. You said yes. I was like, okay, let's go do this. And now you're telling me this is the craziest thing you've ever done. I'm like, I'm talking to this person that has done some of the most amazing adventures I've ever heard of, climbing El Capitan, climbing Mount Kilimanjaro, winning gold medal in the Paralympics, like skiing through Antarctica. I mean, I thought this is just another adventure. And then you tell me this is the craziest thing you've ever done. I'm just like, oh my goodness, what did I get all of these people and Karen and myself into? And I felt some real fear in that moment. I was like, oh my gosh, what did I do? Can you talk a little bit about like those comments and why you felt that in that moment, this was the craziest thing you'd ever done?
So I think I'd never been I have been into environments, obviously, where I can't move myself easily and I do need help to move, but this was next level. Like anyone who approaches me who is paralyzed, who's thinking of going to Everest Base Camp, I'm never going to tell somebody not to do it. But it's not terrain for a wheelchair. And if you like to move independently, it's clearly not the place to go. I think I was managing safety and risk, and to do that I needed to focus a lot all of the time, especially when I was on the bike. But also, like when I was in the basket, it was always in my mind, yeah, I had zero control in that situation. I'm just sat there on someone else's back, just asking the universe for help that their feet aren't going to slip, and making sure that they're fed and watered and not too tired, and just kind of trying to look after the team that were looking after me. So I think that combination of the focus and the terrain and the utter surrender that I needed to do to the porters, and then the really deep focus it needed to ride the bike safely through that terrain, or as safely as I possibly could, was pretty crazy. Like I don't remember, and it was the contrast was really interesting, because on the bike it was really intensely tiring. And you remember we met through the Flow Research Collective when we talk about flow, where you let go of the need to focus. And I didn't get into any flow on the bike at all, because there was so much to manage all of the time and so much to look out for, that I needed to be 100% in my, we talk about the busy beta brain, but thinking, calculating brain waves that were looking at everything and assessing everything and trying to decide where to steer and what, the route, and looking out for the porter's feet and what they were doing. And then in contrast, I'd get in the basket and it would be like every nerve in my body almost could just switch off and go, whoa, okay, now there's nothing I can do other than trust, and I can just let go and try and just focus on breathing and enjoy these mountains. So it was like this extreme contrast from one to the other, of being almost lulled to sleep in the basket and then absolute hyper focus and intensity in the bike. And the combination was pretty, I think, more exhausting than I realized. Like not in the way I'm used to being tired of being super physical. It was physical on the bike and highly physical for the porters, but I think it was like neurologically or mentally really, really tiring. And so it was just different. And therefore I used the label crazier than anything I'd done before. But it was, yeah.
Gosh, it's wild. So you talked about the porters and, kind of how things sort of evolved along the way. I wonder if you could just talk a little bit about your relationship with Baudry and then with the porter team, and how it sort of evolved from the beginning to the end when we got back down and had a big celebration.
Yeah. It was a fantastic experience of being part of their team and working together. It did feel like we were a team. It didn't at the start, obviously. I described already my sense of Badry's resistance to me maybe being on the bike, or it'd be easier just to trust the basket that was built. And I think he just didn't understand initially why I was so, my desire to be on this machine. It was just about getting there, not really how I got there. I think he came to understand that as the journey went along and realized how much it mattered to me. And the initial feeling I had from the porters about not liking the bike, I realized it shifted quite quickly, because, hey, I'm 60. I don't know what I am, to be honest, because I don't easily get on weighing scales, but I'm probably like 64 kilos, something around that. That's quite a lot to carry on your head. These guys, when I was in the basket, they're carrying me on one rice bag strap, which goes right across the forehead. They all help lift me up onto whoever's carrying at that point in time, onto their head. But essentially that person is carrying all of me on their head, which is wild, over really tough terrain at altitude. And so I think they realized the bike was quite this fun teamwork experience and less intense on one of their foreheads at any point in time. So gradually we developed this kind of relationship that was just really nice. They called me Dee Dee, their sister, and I called them my Bais, my brothers. And we started to understand like when was good to stop and when was good to go basket. And I realized more and more they were keen to do the bike as much as possible. And more I was like, I'm strung out now. Can we do the basket so I can just recover mentally for a little bit before the next section? And what I was so impressed with all of the team, not just the 4 or 5 porters that were like assigned to help me, but the whole porter team, was their unbelievable teamwork. Like, we can learn a lot from these people. Like, there's no ego, there's no fighting, there's no argument, there's no discussion about where should we go. No, it looks better there than there. No, I think it's better there. It just flowed. Like, when I say I didn't experience flow, I mean kind of in my mind and the physical aspect of it, but I witnessed it. I was part of a team that were flowing over terrain, and how they did that, and just the ease with which we moved together was quite. I'd say ease we moved together. It wasn't easy, but you get what I mean. The ease of the teamwork element of it was really, really special and quite mind-blowing.
Yeah. And as we're talking about people, I guess I'm curious, just some comments about like the team that we had, the participants, the 15 people that we traveled with, and how supported you felt by that team, and kind of how everybody sort of came together collectively to make this experience happen. Yeah.
Well, one of the things I loved about this trip, and really like about any trip, is if people are having an experience of their own, not just being in my experience, if that makes sense.
Yes.
Because sometimes if it's like, okay, if someone's like focused on, like the porters are focused on me, they're kind of in my world, but the rest of the team were in their own, everyone's in their own world, having their own challenges and their own experience of being in the Himalayas and struggling with altitude, or having their own fears and anxieties about, am I fit enough, or I'm at the back, or all that stuff's going on with with our non-porter team. So I really liked that I was just another person in the group having my experience. It was different to everybody else's, but I think everybody had their own different experience. And you would think that we'd all get to know each other super well being together for those few weeks. And of course you do to a degree, but of course there's still everyone's strung out across the mountain. There are the people that walk faster and those that walk slower, those that like to talk whilst trekking, those that don't. So, we were all having our own unique experience, but it was especially great for me when 2 of our team decided that they wanted to film it. So that was really nice, because they were like and I felt like it was really nice to have that extra support around that also spoke English that I could sometimes share things with. And for that reason, Ryan and Keith were often buzzing around. The other people that were really great to have around were Shiv and Raul, because they could communicate with the porters. So they were, through their Hindi, they were able to just chat to the porters, and it gave me 2 more translators, because I couldn't speak Nepali. We had our own language going, and I learned words of Nepali enough that we could kind of have a little bit of a laugh and manage our team together. But it was great to have that extra input. And I loved it when some of the team just walked for a while, especially when I was in the basket, and chatted to me, because it was sometimes a bit dull just being sat there. I couldn't interact with the porters so much in that scenario either, because I'm sat on top of one of their heads. Clearly, that's not really, and they're not in any state to have any chat, and you can't see each other. And the other porters at that point were often quite busy carrying the bike or my wheelchair, because they also needed carrying as well. So I always appreciated everybody in the team for different reasons at different times. And was really aware that everyone was just having their own journey too.
Yeah. Karen, we made it to base camp and got
we made it safely, and we made it back down safely.
Yeah, successfully, safely. I mean, that was the biggest thing. Can we get up and down safely? But we had fun. I mean, along this journey, I mean, we had laughter, we had tears, we had all kinds of individual experiences, as you pointed out. I'm just curious, like, now that we're back, what are some of your key reflections and learnings?
I think like the faces and memories of the porters stay with me so closely. I've had a few Facebook calls with some of them, which has been really nice. Like, hey, Didi, we in Dingbotti in the dark. They're in their porter accommodation and just saying hello. And that connection feels really, really nice. But it's not really the memories of all the difficulties, like the broken axles and all the improbable repairs, although they stay with me. But I think it's like that idea of just utter surrender. I feel like we were lifted into another dimension or another kingdom for a while up there in the Himalayas, away from traffic, away from everything, just a path and a trail, and most people on it with the same goal and the same journey underway. And the surrender that involved to the flow of it and the harmony of it and the challenge of it and all the unexpectedness of it. It's a reminder that trust of just letting things unfold is really, really valuable. And actually that's really helping me in life right now in some new ways that I've not experienced before.
Yeah. Karen, the very first episode we did together was about finding your inner gold. That's something that's been kind of a theme in your life. What inner gold did this trip help you uncover?
So I don't think it uncovered anything entirely new to me, but what it did was like deepen some of those aspects, surrender and trust. It's like they've been taken to new levels that I've probably never been to before. And that's really special. I think there's so much in our day-to-day life that we think we are in charge of or think we're in control of. Often we're not, or we're in denial, or something else is going on. So it's, I think it's making me live each day just even more, just with, okay, what's today or what's tomorrow morning? And then let's just trusting, surrendering.
Yeah. Wow. Well, obviously we got to have the moment at 17,500 feet on the rock at base camp. I mean, that was special. And we got to come back down and celebrate the party with the porters that very last night. That was so much fun. Such a fun thing to see. They were so loving, caring, responsible, taking care of everything, making sure that you get up and down safely. And then we get to the last night in the hotel and to see them just kind of let loose a little bit and smile and have fun and dance. I mean, how cool was that?
It was great. There were moments that were less great, like Kumar's fake hair dye that then spread onto all of our faces and clothes because he was sweating so much. His hair dye was being spread around everybody. But no, it was really special.
Yeah, it was awesome to celebrate. But yeah, I mean, congratulations. And I mean, it is something worth celebrating. I'm totally in awe and just so grateful that we got to have this experience together. So,
well, Scott, I feel deeply thankful to you for suggesting it, for inviting me to be part of what essentially was your WIBA. And it became mine too, or maybe it was already, and I'm in denial of that. But it was really, really great to be there. Just to places I've heard of, mountains I've heard of, but never imagined I would actually, be spending the night in Namche Bazaar or trekking beneath Amadablam or looking up at the Khumbu Icefall. Like, it's crazy that we were there, and thanks to your trust and surrender and an ability just to open up adventure to everybody. I don't think I'd be there without you. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you, Karen. It was awesome. And I'm super grateful for your friendship and also super thankful for your help with this new book, Campfire Within.
Absolutely.
And you wrote the foreword.
Which you literally posted out just before we left for the Everest trip. So, yeah, really special. It's beautiful in hardback as well. And I think everything within it is a reminder of why we should say yes to the call for adventure. And you described very beautifully that one of those early experiences with your daughter camping and just that idea of getting other families and young people out into nature. So it's definitely a good read, especially for anyone who's wanting to bring more adventure into their life or their family's lives.
Well, I appreciate your help. Thank you for that, and for writing an amazing foreword. So, yes. So, Karen, what's next for you?
Oh, Scott, I've noticed a recent resistance to that question because it's like, is it not enough? I'm just like I'm just going to be at home for a while and enjoy Scotland
You can
and
just relax.
cut my grass and do a bit of writing. So yeah, there's a fairly relaxed summer ahead, I have to say. Just enjoying a bit of routine and the beauty of Scotland. I do have a sea kayaking retreat I've organised later at the end of June here in Scotland, so I'm excited for that, and another one in Mallorca in November. And the purpose of those retreats is really about helping people have more time outside and in nature, resetting the nervous systems when we do that in different ways. And it's really easy just to be on the gravy train, isn't it? Doing things. And it is important that we step off it, whether that's to have a big adventure or whether it's to reset in some way so that we can live daily life with a little bit more trust and flow and grace and all the things that make it feel good.
Yeah, Karen, how can people find out more about your retreats and maybe engage with you? How do people find out more?
I put most things on my Instagram, which is at handbikedarke. So handbike, as it sounds, all one word, and darke, D-A-R-K-E. I have got a website, which is karendarke.com, although you do have to dig into it a little bit to find what I'm up to and retreat information and so on. But those are the two places I'd point people to.
Karen, thank you. So first of all, thank you for saying yes. Thank you for your friendship, for being such a fan of the podcast and this amazing adventure that we got to share together. And thank you for just spending some time with me today. I feel like I got to go back to Nepal today and sort of revisit the whole experience.
And I want to extend my thank you to you, to all of the team that traveled from all over the world to be with us there, and to all of the Nepali team who just made it all so possible. So yeah, amazing thing.
Yes. And for those listening, I hope you have been inspired today as much as I have. I hope our story has encouraged you to listen to the voice inside that calls you to adventure, because we want to hear your story next. If you have a story to tell or just need a nudge to create one, please send me an email. We'd also appreciate it if you'd help us spread the word by leaving a review and sharing or tagging Inspire Campfire in your social media. And until next time, I want to encourage you to get outside. Thanks for listening. Karen, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for listening.